Right. Good morning, everybody. In the regular board meeting of the Tahoe Trucking Sanitation Agency for July 17th to order. At this point, we will do roll call.
We have Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smeltzer,
Yes.
Director Wilkins,
Present.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
and Director Chesney.
Here, so at this point, if we'd all stand and we'll do the pledge of allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, wait,
Yes.
Rochelle thought I'd be safer over here.
Okay.
Sorry.
We have so much.
Yeah.
Okay, item 2, public comment. At this point, the board entertain any comments from the public on an item that's not already on the agenda. Anybody have public comment? Anything that we received electronically or anybody online? No?
No.
Okay, then we'll close public comment and go to item 3, professional achievements, awards, anniversaries, and staff development.
Good morning, President Chief and Directors. We can move on to Human Resources Administrator. As we do on a monthly basis, I would like to acknowledge some staff for their achievements, awards, and also some new employees. So first up, we have the fourth quarter safety suggestion awards. And they're not here today, but we have Jesus Zarate and Aaron Carlson that submitted their safety suggestions, and the awards were made as 2 hours of safety AL or safety leave for each one of those. And then we have 3 new employees, and we've heard in our manager reports on a regular basis how difficult it has been to recruit nowadays. You guys are probably experiencing that at your locations also, so we're super excited to announce 3 new employees. And we have Lucas Talbot. Lucas is our new information technology specialist working in the IT department. Welcome, Lucas.
Thank you.
And we have Jason Sutherland. He is the new electrical and instrumentation technician 3 in the E&I department. And Brandon Hernandez, also an electrical and instrumentation technician 3. So welcome, and we're super excited about that.
Thank you, for the folks that had the, safety suggestions, our appreciation and congratulations, and look forward to you guys hopefully having a long and prosperous career here at TTSA. Yeah, fantastic. Great, we'll move on to, a public hearing. At this point, I will open a public hearing on the consideration of putting our collection of delinquent sewer service charges on the tax rolls. It's something that we're required to do before we can actually go to the county and get any delinquencies collected as part of the tax roll. And so this was noticed. It was noticed in the paper. See familiar faces out there. I don't think you guys are interested in having any issues on that. So, and did we receive any written comment from the public regarding this?
None whatsoever.
Okay, and so if I'm not mistaken, before I close the public hearing, we'll be revisiting this after the consent items to actually adopt resolutions for the collection of delinquent fees on the tax roll. So seeing no public comment, I will at this time. Unless there's any public comment at all, we will close the public hearing and move on to our consent agenda. So public hearing is closed. Go to item 5, consent agenda, the minutes and the ratification of the general fund warrants. Does anybody have anything on there that they wanted to bring to the attention on that? It sounds like Dave's got
One item there, it's just a small thing, on item 10, where the vote was, Director Wilkins abstained, but at the top it says an aye, but that he said yes, tiny item.
Authorization of GM to write into, right of entry agreement for the Truckee Music Festival.
Okay, I can make that correction.
That was all I had.
Good catch, Director Smelser. So I will entertain a motion to accept the consent items with that one amendment to the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Cox,
I'll second.
seconded by Smelser. Any comments? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. And then move on to the regular agenda. So now we're back to item one in that, which is consideration of resolutions to adopt reports on delinquent charges for collection on the 25 tax roll. So folks that we haven't received payment, I guess this would be direct billing that weren't received during the 23-24 year, we can now put on the tax roll for 25 to pick up those funds. And you guys provided a itemization of those entities.
And there's only two?
I think there was a couple per county. Nothing
Yes.
too substantial. Do we reach out to those folks and let them know that this is going on the agenda to be collected on the tax roll?
Yes, they're noticed several times. I believe they get monthly and quarterly statements, and then they are notified several times up until the period of tax roll collection.
Okay.
So they get several different types of billings so that they're aware it's not a typical billing, and that it is going to be put to the tax roll.
Okay, and they may prefer it that way. Very good. Can we? Do we have to do each resolution separately, or do we do one roll call to adopt all three resolutions?
I put it on one agenda item.
Okay.
Because the last year we discussed this and asked for approval from council, like Josh wants to open up about this, but last year we did ask for this. Since it's all the same type, I did put them as separate one agenda item with separate bullet points.
Right.
Listing each resolution separately, if you want to acknowledge them, but you can make one motion and
Okay.
approve them all at once.
Sorry.
Sorry.
And
Josh, no,
I concur with that. That's fine, given that they're all the same subject matter. It's fine to do it that way. Just the motion should just make sure that each of the resolutions are called out.
it's good. Any of the board member have any questions about this process or specific on any of the?
No questions
Delinquent
on the
items?
process, but Rochelle, is any of the accounts that are delinquent commercial?
That I am not sure, since we don't have a representative from the billing department, but each parcel is listed on the resolution and required attachments. So there's two for, let's see, there's two for. Well, they're each listed for each resolution by parcel number. So I'm not sure if they are residential or commercial.
So El Dorado County doesn't have any delinquencies?
They do not.
Okay. No further questions.
I make a motion that we approve resolution 5-2024, resolution 6-2024, and resolution 7-2024.
Second?
Okay. Any public comment? Hearing any? We'll do a roll call.
Okay. Director Cox?
Yes.
Director Smelser?
Yes.
Director Wilkins?
Yes.
And Director Wilson? Director Wilson, Director Tressi.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Great. Thank you, staff. Item 2 is review and approval of the June 2024 financial results. You know, it looks like we've got Liz.
Good
Virtually.
morning.
Morning.
I'm here. My giant face is on the computer screen. I can see it. Well, I just wanted to quickly touch on our June 30 financials. I do have one correction to make in the staff report. It states that only 55.9% of the budget had been expended, while we have 100% of the fiscal year complete. That is incorrect. That was last year's or last month's number. I failed to update it. It should say 76.5% of the total budget has been expended through June 30th. We'll touch on that in just 1 second. Taking a look quickly at Fund 10, really of noteworthy is that there is additional tax revenue. It was an RDA pass-through from Nevada and Placer County. Everything else for revenues happened just as we expected. For the expenditures, I will note that we still have an open accrual period. So the expenditures you see here were paid prior to June 30th. We do still have our books open through August 31st, taking any accruals for items that were purchased and received prior to the June 30 fiscal year end date. Also not included in this report, because we just received the information late yesterday, there's additional fund interest from LAIF. They just reported it, and so I will bring these results back to you next month, and I'll add a column that will show you the accruals and the additional information that we're able to put back to the 630 books. I also would like to note that at Finance Committee yesterday, we talked about the fund balance transfer recommendations that were mentioned in the budget presentation last month and for the approval. So next month, I'm going to bring a recommendation based on what we know at that time. And I will have a recommendation for board approval so that we can transfer some money from Fund 10 to Fund 6 to prepare for our capital expenditures. Looking at Fund 2 and Fund 6, the biggest stories on those expenditures are that we paid our debt payment as anticipated. There were some project expenditures, but again, nothing out of the ordinary. Same story for the cash balance statement. If you take a look at the total cash, the big story is we have more money this year than last year, and we anticipated that. We raised rates. That was the intent of that. And also you can see that there's less cash than last month because we made that debt payment. Again, everything as anticipated. Are there any questions on the revenue or expenditures for those three funds? I will take the stunned silence and have one last comment. If you take a look at the total cash balances, the very last fund chart, that illustrates everything that I just said. If you take a look at that FY24 line, you can see that we ended the year of total cash higher than the last two fiscal years as anticipated. And as we commented at Finance Committee yesterday, you can see that uptick towards May where we received that payment from the tax roll. And then it drops down because we make our anticipated debt payment. So again, nothing unexpected in these charts. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Liz.
Mhm.
Just, I think on general finance question, last month we approved the budget. It was sort of in a tabular form. Where are we at in terms of kind of publishing the budget? And is it going to be up on the website if we ever had a budget question?
We'll have the budget book for August,
Okay,
and then it will be posted to the website as well.
okay.
Like with vacations and holiday, we were able to provide deadline for the board.
Thanks. We'll move on to item 3.
Actually, we need a motion for.
Oh, we need a motion. Sorry. Thank you for catching that. Entertain a motion to approve the financial statements for the month of June. Moved by Director Smeltzer,
I'll second.
seconded by Director Wilson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 3, looking at a resolution revising the wastewater capital reserve fund budget and making related findings.
Okay, so Liz will take this one as well.
Yep. So this one is standard. We bring a resolution to the board at the beginning of the fiscal year, talking about how much money is left for Fund 2 and what the budget is. So the documents note that as of June 30, there was $17.3 million in the wastewater capital reserve. And the anticipated spend for FY25 right now is $4.5 million, which includes the debt payment. There's sufficient funding in Fund 2 to support this. The resolution is attached, as well as the capital expenditure chart for the next 5 years that was included in the budget presentation last month.
Any questions on the board regarding this resolution? Seeing none,
I move approval of resolution 8-2024.
Second?
okay, public comment, not seeing any, roll call.
Director Cox.
Yeah.
Director Smelser.
Yes.
Director Wilkins.
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
And Director Tresson.
Yes.
In favor? Motion approved.
Resolution adopted, and we'll move on to item 4. Approval to reject bids for the 2024 digital scanning of the sewer line.
Good morning, Board Director Scott Lund, Senior Engineer, here today to request that we approve the rejection of all bids for the 2024 digital scanning and sewer lines project. A little background, we inspect the TRI on a regular basis. Historically, we've been doing it annually, about a third of the TRI per year, just to break it up into manageable chunks. This year we had five interested bidders at the mandatory pre-bid meeting. So we were expecting to get more competitive bids. We had one receiving one from Plant Solutions at $6 per linear foot. Based off of historical bid prices, we were expecting and budgeted for about $140,000 for the contract. So as you can see, it's substantially higher than anticipated for the project. And with that in mind, we're looking to reject for this year.
So we would just, kind of push everything back, a year, or you think you'd bid 2 sessions next year?
So we discussed that internally a little bit. The intent and what I'd like to see is, from a perspective of, I don't have the historical background why we broke it into a third. I assumed it was for manageable group sections, but there's no reason a contractor could not perform inspection of the entire TRI in one summer. I would like to move to once every 3 or 4 years.
Just the whole thing.
Yeah, do the whole thing. I think we'll get more competitive bid prices and it'll be easier to attract larger bidders that can provide a more competitive price for the agency. And it will also minimize staff effort to open us up to other things because we're administering another contract on a manual basis. It just seems like an easier way to go with managing this one. So
Do you think next year you bid the entirety?
I would like to. I mean, that's something we'll need to plan, request a budget for, but that would be my recommendation.
And you said 6 people, original 6?
Yeah, so we normally get 1 to 2 bids a year depending, and one of the bidders we typically have seen historically did not bid this year. I did call and inquire, and they said they did not have the staffing and availability. I think they're having some turnover issues. So that competitive bid price that we've historically seen there offer us, so.
Didn't we have a certain contractor, I thought it was maybe Pro Pipe or Mountain Pipe or something like that, that we worked with year after year after year. They knocked it out of the park with their, TV, resolutions and all that stuff. And did they not bid, or is that the low bid?
No, so they did not bid this year, and that was the contractor. Pro Pipe was the one.
Pro Pipe was who we were using in the past,
Yeah,
and they didn't want to bid on it?
no, it wasn't that they didn't want to bid, they just didn't have staffing available this year. They've had some turnover, so they're in the process of training new staff. So they said they would be more than interested next year if we were to re-advertise the entire pipe segment. They said they could commit to doing the work next year, but this year it wasn't. And so, and there's a bigger discussion here. I know Jay Parker previously talked about CCTV versus digital scanning. That's something we can also consider maybe in the future, but Jay was a pretty large proponent of the HD resolution. I think for the cost for digital scanning for CCTV. Most of your cost is in labor at this point, more so than the equipment used, so. Just inevitably, I don't think we're gonna have a huge savings if we went back to using CCTV for pipe inspection.
So how critical is this scanning? If we, obviously, we're gonna reject the bids. And do you feel that we're gonna get a bid within that $140,000 envelope?
So it's hard to say. ProPipe did allude that costs have gone up as we've seen industry wide. If we were to advertise the entire TRI segment next summer, we're gonna have to budget more either way, because even if we get closer to that price per linear foot that we were paying for the last few years, we're still talking about doing potentially all 3 contracts in 1 year and then just breaking it up to be less frequent. So I would say you're probably looking at, I don't know, offhand, if we were averaging 150 for 140, 150 per year for a third of the pipe, it would probably end up being about 450,000 for next year we need to budget. But then we'd have 2 years without having to do anything. So it's kind of, you're gonna divide it up, but you're still inspecting it once every 3 years. So either way, you're not gonna see that pipe segment again for another 3 years. So it's kind of, it's happening.
So we're on a 3-year plan here, and we had budgeted like 140,000 for this section of our system that to be viewed. And are you gonna come back next month with a revised bid, or how are we gonna do this? Because to stay on this schedule of what we've committed to, we've got to execute some kind of a contract soon, don't we?
No, so the last time this was inspected was, this is the 3rd year, we're required for the SSMP to inspect it once every 4 years. So we have a year of grace in there, basically, per our own SSMP that we wrote. We managed to be compliant with the Water Quality Control Board. So effectively, if we inspect it next year, we're still fully compliant with our SSMP.
So we could forego this section of viewing and not really be interrupting on any of our plans.
No, we would still be inspecting fully in compliance with our Water Quality Control Board SSMP. So we would be in full compliance with that, and we'd be still inspecting once every 4 years. We do it. My speculation is for instances like this, where if we can't get the work performed, let's say we had weather or contractor issues, we're not in violation if we don't see it this year. So it gives us a year of grace effectively.
So as I understand it, what you're recommending is that we reject all bids now, that we not rebid anything this year. And that you be, talking internally with other staff about potentially recommending to us next year that we budget to do a video inspection of the entirety of the TRI.
Yes, that is correct. That would be.
And that if you decided not to do that, you would potentially be recommending we do 2/3 of it next year, which would be the section we skipped this year, plus the section we would have normally done next year.
Yes, that's
So,
correct.
so we'll probably see one or the other of those recommendations as part of our budget next year.
Yes, that's correct. And to add to that too, Dan, part of it as well is just, with the weather window we have here, historically, we've allocated for end of Labor Day time period through October. And, if we were to go and re-advertise instead this summer into the fall, we're up against kind of a weather window too as well, where we potentially might not have access to all those segments anyway if we get early season storms. So I prefer not to be pushed up against that window as well, we can delay here, so.
So Scott, the budgeting of 140,000 this year was based on last year's actual numbers?
Yeah, and we were actually substantially less, so we've had quite a bit of variation in bidding years for a whole host of reasons. I've seen contracts go from, I think last year we were at 56,000 for a whole entire segment. We got an extremely competitive bid price to 2 or 3 years ago, we were up over 6 figures, so it varies. ProPipe seems inconsistent. They've been the historic low bid and awarded the contract, but it seems like their pricing hasn't always been a consistent steady, but we have to try to forecast for our worst case scenario of them bidding higher.
And your belief is that by bidding all three sections, you'll get more competitive roof line?
I would like to think so, because we should be able to attract a larger contractor, Profile is a large contractor, but other large contractors as well, that might otherwise go. And that's not really of interest, trucking beating market, as you guys all know, it's challenging to get people up here to bid some of these smaller projects, so I think,
Let's just say the mobilization charges,
Yeah.
where we pay one instead of three.
Yeah. Makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense.
I guess a little more background to, a lot of these crews are either mobilizing from the Bay or Profile historically is brought from Southern California, Phoenix, so it's a substantial cost in, so.
Scott, what other maintenance activities do we do on the TRI? So I think for going a year of TV is fine, but is there, do we pop every manhole on an annual basis? What is our cleaning?
I would like Paul to speak on that, I don't see him in the room, but maybe Richard, do you want to speak on that one?
The cleaning schedule's been based on what's been observed during digital scanning. We have one section that has some aspens that routinely will roof fall over a few years.
Okay,
We did that. We removed that roof fall right around 2019, I think, and it takes 2 or 3 years for it to come back. So based on what they see, then we'll schedule cleaning accordingly. Otherwise, we have crews that do the flow meter studies twice a year, so they're popping manholes, and we have someone do an annual TRI walk where we'll drop him off up at Tahoe City, and then ride a bike all the way down, check all the manholes, look for any erosion, stuff like that.
Okay.
On an annual basis.
okay, yeah, that's,
And additionally for property developments, for example, Legacy Trail to Town just is finishing up their extension this year in the bridge. They're required to CCTV post-construction activities as well, which is usually for me a little more concerning. A lot of the routine inspection work is activities going on above the TRI as it relates to construction activities where contractors are heavily working pipe. So those we typically push onto developers to inspect post. So we're not missing any of that.
Right.
For going this for a year.
and the TV is obviously a good thing for us to do. You wouldn't pick up on root balls or things that are inside the pipes, but it's not the one and only maintenance activity we do on the TRI. It's good to hear that we walk the entire line on an annual basis. That's pretty good. Great. Any other questions from the board? Anything from the public? At this point, entertain a motion to reject the bid for the 2024 pipeline scanning project.
So moved.
One second.
Moved by Cox and seconded by Wilson. Any other comments? Not? All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion approved.
Thanks, board.
Yep, thank you, Scott. Item 5, approval to award the bid for procurement of sodium hypochlorite multi-year contract. Mike?
Morning, board of directors, Michael Peak, operations department manager. Here in front of you today to ask for approval to award the bid for procurement or sodium hypochlorite in a multi-year contract. If you remember last month, I asked you to deny or not accept the bid that we had gotten because it did not meet our contractual obligations. We rebid, and the agency has solicited the bids to purchase sodium hypochlorite for the upcoming 24-26 fiscal years. And the breakdown was submitted. Univar was the low bid. You can see that we have a clear 2-year bid process here. The fiscal impacts are about $55,000 is what the difference is between what we had previous compared to this. The recommendation is that management staff would recommend the approval to award procurement of sodium hypochlorite to the appropriate lowest responsive bidder, which would be Univar. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. So basically, Michael, we're buying bleach
Yes.
and
12.5% bleach. Yes.
12.5% bleach. And how many shipments? I mean, 140,000 gallons. that seems to me like we're gonna have trucks rolling in and out of here frequently.
Very true.
Carry-
It's about 4,000 gallons per, 4,500 gallons per truck.
And as far as for our consumption, per day, what are we looking at? We looking at a truck every week or?
On average, probably about a truck a week. We're using right now about 600 gallons a day. That will change throughout the year, it just depends on what the demand is and how much flow we have. So that will fluctuate. We've seen it as low as 400 gallons a day and as high as 700-800 gallons a day, so.
Now, with that kind of consumption, Mike, do we have any facility on site that could store our bleach or our,
Yes, that's the project we went through with the 3 bleach tanks that we had added.
those are gonna be our storage tanks? So that basically we won't have a truck coming in every week, we'll have a storage capacity so that we can go ahead and run, let's say through January or February when the winter months and the road conditions can be marginally acceptable.
Yes,
We will be able to operate without issue.
yes.
Perfect.
What's our storage capacity like?
We have 3 6,500 gallon tanks, so about 18,000 gallons.
It's 20,000. Yeah. And we have a pad, if I'm not mistaken, for an additional one.
We
In the future.
And also, you know, you have to be careful how much you store because it does have a shelf life and it'll start to lose some of its strength over time and you'll have to use more stuff. But that'll all be taken into consideration, and when we make these contracts, these chemical providers. You know, we've not had a lot of issue with them getting through, you know, Caltrans does a great job, keeps the freeway open for the most part. Typically, they have multiple routes to be able to get trucks up here. And we've not had a problem getting chemical with the severe weather, so.
It's great, nice that they fixed the price for a 2-year window, no escalation. At 15% more than what we were seeing previously. Do you recall so we're looking at a total projected cost per year of roughly $430,000. What was not that I want to go back, but it is for, you know, the difference, what were we paying annually for chlorine gas?
We were probably right around, I think the last time we bid that out, we were about $80,000 for the year.
Okay, so significant chemical cost increase, but offset by
And we had discussed that, we knew it was gonna be an
Other
increase.
benefits. Yep, yeah.
When you say other benefits of safety, you're talking safety.
Yeah,
For
for
environment, public.
staff and probably a lot of, you know, safety protocols and internal costs, as well, so.
And we've seen or heard through the grapevine, gaseous chlorine is increasing in price substantially.
Right, that was based on,
As well as availability, just because more and more people are going to safer solutions.
Yeah, and just, I mean, we had a couple of times, we had a force majeure on that didn't affect us, but. You know, we were, that there may be a, shortage and that definitely prices were gonna be going up and. More and more people are moving away from gaseous chlorine.
thank you, Mike. Any other questions?
So we're looking at $55,000 a year more than our chlorine gas. Wow.
Now, with the $55,000 a year is just the increase from what our last contract for sodium hypochlorite was.
I get it. Okay, so the increase from going to the sodium hypochlorite is how much a year over chlorine gas?
It's roughly $300,000 a year,
200 or
300
300,000.
from where we were. Not to say that if we had stayed with gaseous chlorine, we'd be seeing that savings. We don't know exactly what that would have gone up for us, so. But just from when we stopped in 2022 to now.
It's 300,000 more
Yes.
for sodium hypochlorite. Okay,
Any other questions? I'd like to make a motion to approve the bid for sodium hypochlorite with Univar. 2-year contract.
so moved.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any comments? Thank you, Mike. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. And, right, interesting. On that item 6, a discussion and approval of a freight and transport study phase 1.
Board of Directors, Justin, Jason Haley, Technical Services Manager. So you might recall last year, somewhere in the last half of the year, we had discussed approaching the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board, discussing some cleanup on our permit. We actually in January sent them a request to have our permit revised, and we have some specific things that I believe we discussed at length during the board meetings that we wanted to have specifically cleaned up, mostly related to stuff that the facility doesn't even have anymore. Studies that were performed 20 years ago have been completed and are really irrelevant now. So we submitted that request to have our permit revised. And we received a letter in response in February that they had some requests before they would be willing to revise our permit. And that was specifically a freight and transport study. There was some other data requests, but they requested a freight and transport study. And the last time that was performed for the facility, it was in the late 90s. So they were not confident using data from 25 years ago to make decisions about today's permit. And have requested that. So we reached out to Jacobs Engineering, which many of you would recognize as CH2 on Hill. They had performed all that work initially for us here. They had done all the soil studies for the initial build. And in the 90s, when we were exploring the disposal field and issues that we were seeing there. So we reached out to them to get a proposal. It's a little complex because we're not 100% sure exactly what the board's looking for, the regional board. So what Jacobs has recommended is that we do a 2-phase approach. Phase 1 is just going to be data collection of information that we already have, doing assessments, and putting ourselves in a position where we can approach the regional board with a proposal for the physical study that they would like to have done. Because at this point, the language for the request is a bit vague. And we're not 100% sure whether or not, for instance, can this be done bench scale, or does this need to be done real scale? Can this be done theoretically through flow and chemical calculations, or does this need to be done in our field in real time? During what period of years, during over how many years? There's a lot of questions that we don't have a lot of answers to. So hopefully phase 1 will put us in a position where we will know exactly what to study in the phase 2. Does that make sense? I know it's a bit convoluted, I apologize. So what you're looking at today is just phase 1 of a 2-phase study, $95,000 pays for a 12-week study that will, the deliverable from this will be the information we need to move into phase 2.
So in essence, the communication we got back from them was not clear, or there were many parts that were convoluted.
It appeared to be very formatted language.
Okay.
And when we spoke to representatives from the regional board, they didn't have a lot of specific answers for some of our questions. So it's hard to say exactly what they're looking for.
Have you reviewed this work scope with any of the regional board reps to communicate with them?
We communicated that this was our plan, is to do a 2-phase approach where we would take available information and come to them with what we plan on doing in the real, and ensuring that what we come out with is going to actually accommodate. Yeah.
Okay.
And Jason, just in the big picture, the freight and transport, it's not really the treatment component, it has to do with from the discharge point and the percolation field, the sub SAT,
Yes.
what does that stand for again? Soil aquifer treatment, thank you. to wherever it goes.
Correct.
Okay,
So effectively, what they're looking for is soils that are in our disposal pool can assimilate hydraulically and they can assimilate chemically. That's why we went with the term SAT, because there were, at one point, there was more, but there is still some degree of treatment that happens in that field. So this kind of plays into it. A really, really big part of this is between the late nineties when this was done, and 2003, when we had our permit last revived because of the BNR expansion. There has been designations on both Martis Creek and the Truckee River for being impacted for nutrients. So, they're in a position where they need to look more closely at that.
So we're basically gonna spend $100,000 to clarify. Hopefully, what they need.
To some extent, yeah.
have we done a previous freight and transport study? Was there by that title?
That specific title, no, there was work done in the nineties. That they assessed like the periods of time that it took for water to move through the system. There was work done in the seventies, to assess the ability of the soils to hydraulically absorb. But as far as the freight and transport specifically as it relates to nitrogen and phosphorus as they requested, no. That's not.
And you know, does the regional board have the in-house expertise to even digest the information you're gonna provide them? Or are they gonna send it out to yet another consultant to review?
Yes
I
and
don't know that
no.
you can answer that, but.
Yes and no, so the process of reassessing or revising a permit, it spends a lot of time in the regional board, but it also spends some time with the state board. So when we give them the information they're looking for, they review it, they go through it, it goes through their processes, but then it goes to the state board as well.
So I want to chime in on what Blake just said. We monitor well, isn't it well 31 here at the river?
That is our.
Our primary
That's our
test,
compliance well.
our
We
compliance well.
monitor. Well, several wells for a lot of different constituents, so we can see the changes in the ground from where we do discharge, so. Well 31 is our compliance well that we monitor and we report to the state, but we also have a lot of reporting on the other wells.
But well 31 is the one that's closest to the river, correct?
It's considered the final point prior to
Right.
getting into any service.
So it seems to me that if we have any anomalies in any of the readouts in well 31 or any of the other wells, we could do that information and compile that information in-house, couldn't we?
Yeah, but what we're looking for is the specifics, so there was 2 points that the regional board was requesting. And it's assimilative capacity, which is effectively how much can the soil accommodate, both chemically for phosphorus and nitrogen and hydraulically. They want to have an assessment of that.
And we can't determine that in-house.
You know, that's a very complex question.
I see.
And on this letter from Jacobs, items 1 and 2, is that basically what came from Lahontan
Verbatim.
verbatim? And if we try to answer that directly,
One, we are answering internally, that's just a data request. 2 is a little more complex with the groundwater gradient, that's geotechnical, that we would have to have a geotechnical staff engineered some study on that.
Okay,
And we would have no idea what the second phase would cost.
They would be a little bit guessing. They have provided me some level of estimate that they're very clear is a wild guess. And we've used that for budgeting purposes. So this has already been budgeted for at 400,000, I believe. Total. Yeah, and that was a very outside estimate for both phase 1 and 2.
For both phases.
Yes.
Any other questions?
No, I would move that we authorize staff to enter into this contract with Jacobs.
And I just, Richard and Michelle, just, I'd like the minutes, the item is, discussion and approval of the Fate Transport Study. It almost reads like we're approving the completion of the study. Just let's make sure that it's more clear that we're approving either a professional services contract or that this action is not the approval of the study itself, but just execution of a contract to perform phase one of the study. So we have a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
I'll second.
All right, we got a second by Smelser. And any other questions? Yeah, it's, these are big ticket items, but we gotta deal with our regulator, and so it's the world we live in. At this point, if there's no other comments, all in favor of approving the contract with Jacobs for the Fate Transport Study phase one, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you, look forward to follow-up reports on this. And move to item 7, a progress update on the nutrient removal alternative study.
Okay, so this one's a little long. In March, the board approved a study that staff was recommending to look at and assess alternative treatment processes of the facility, to compare those alternative treatment systems to our current plan, which is to rehab and revitalize existing facilities. So there was, we've gone through a pretty good sized phase. This is one of the updates that was requested as part of the revision of the scope originally. So, Tim Loper is here too. He is, with Rural Engineers, and we provide Flow for, me to call in some assistance. He's here and, knowledgeable. So, we've just got a brief presentation for you guys, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask some questions. Go ahead, Michelle. So Earl put this presentation together for us, so very much appreciated, a lot. We're gonna be looking at the objectives, some stuff that we've already discussed, but some of the, we're just revisit that, because this is gonna be a few months in between meetings, so we'll refresh ourselves on that. So we looked at the existing facilities and regulatory framework, which is pertinent considering what we were just discussing for the other study. We're going to look at potential evaluation criteria and metrics that we've worked with Pro put together. Pro did new load and flow projections that were built on top of what was done in the 2022 master plan. They also revisited process capacities and specific bottlenecks in the facility. And then we'll talk about what our next steps are. And again, we're looking at the broad picture is we're looking at what's available in the world these days. A lot has happened in 50 years in the water treatment. There is numerous treatment that did not exist back then. So we're hoping that we can either qualify our existing master plan or come up with a more feasible solution. And so we're looking for best bet. We're gonna investigate the feasibility of all these alternatives. And we're gonna select the best bet, and that will be a collaborative process with the board and staff. So it's not gonna be something we can come to you one day and say, this is what we're doing, what do you think? And then after we've made some decisions about which direction we want to go, then we will flesh it out to develop 10% conceptualization, including facility locations, stuff like that. So on this kind of process flow diagram here, we're here, first meeting. Again, we've developed some evaluation parameters and looked at the existing facility, and I'll show you some of those numbers. Okay, existing facilities. Here. So again, we saw this same infographic last time we discussed this. These are the facilities that this study touches. It represents a pretty substantial portion of our process. When we say secondary treatment, when we say nutrient removal, we're referring to anything that removes nitrogen and phosphorus specifically. Those are kind of the two key factors for us, which we'll discuss a little bit later in the regulatory framework. And then here, next is a map. It's a little busy, but I think it tells the story, which is some of the facilities get pretty old. Yellow represents everything that was part of the original 1975 build. And then red represents everything that came in 1981, very shortly after. So yellow and red represents close to 50-year-old portions of the facility, which are also pretty well represented in that prior diagram. So we've looked at a lot of different areas for potential future expansion. We've got a lot of property, but there's constraints. So we'll be looking at any opportunities we have to utilize space. Go ahead and keep clear. There you go. So we've identified some areas. Again, very, very preliminary at this point. We just wanted to make sure that we have this discussion early so that we're not including space that was already dedicated to something else. As we just discussed with the big transport study, we discharged subsurface soil, and it does in fact make its way to some surface water bodies. And there is water quality objectives associated with those water bodies that, as we move through this regulatory process, could come up. Limitations might change. These are just quick blurbs of what our existing limitations are. Dale, you had discussed well 31, our total phosphorus, total nitrogen limits, those are already existing, very low. Compared to much of what the rest of the California wastewater world has to deal with, these are very low. There might be possibilities where they'll go substantially lower in the future. We don't know. We have got, all we know at this point is we've talked to some other wastewater treatment facilities on similarly impacted water bodies, and there's been some borderline unrealistic conversations about district limits. So we want to kind of consider that. We don't know a lot yet, so we're not going to, bank on these things, but we do have to be aware that these are potential constraints we could be looking at in the future. And as I mentioned, the receiving water limitations, these are existing, so also very, very low. There's a lot of water bodies in other parts of California where these numbers are closer to 10 and 1, which is substantially higher than what we're dealing with. There is a risk in the future, depending on what goes on with the Truckee River. It's a very, very sensitive water body. It's very pristine, and people want to keep it that way. These limits could potentially be on the table for discussion in the future as well. And again, the reason we want to explore these concepts early, even though we don't have a lot of information, is one of the questions we're going to be asking is, does our current available technology, let's say we created a theoretical limit lower than this, can our technology meet that limit? Yes, no. Is there alternatives that can? Yes, no. So we're having to kind of play a little bit at the edges and predict a little bit what we might see in the regulatory future.
So in essence, position ourselves for potential future change.
Correct. Some technologies lend themselves better to being scalable than others. Some technologies have a theoretical ceiling associated with them. And if that theoretical ceiling isn't much lower than what we're looking at here, that might pose a problem.
Jason, it looks like all of our effluent limitations and receiving water limitations are all concentration based. Is there a move afoot? I know that they've also got these TMDL. It's a not just concentration, but it's a mass of material. Do you know, is the state or the regional board starting to place those kind of limits more and more? Is it everything still staying pretty much on a concentration basis?
Well, so if you're on an MPDES permit and you're in any kind of water management basin, say on a particular river watershed or something, there is likely a TMDL associated with that region, and they're assigning each individual discharger a portion of that TMDL. And so right now, we're on the WDR, that is not likely to be part of the conversation yet, especially since the other affected dischargers are in a different state. There's complexities associated, it's not unheard of.
Right.
There is a definite possibility that a TMDL for several constituents, TDS, TSS, nitrate, phosphorus, all those things, that there is precedence for TMDLs.
The fate and transport study that we just approved the phase one in, if that really shows, I think we already know that there's connectivity between where we discharge kind of up on our entrance road and it getting into the river, even though it goes into the ground first, that might push them towards the NPDS permit as if it's a discharge to a water body or.
So that's a very complex,
Right.
side conversation. So effectively what you have is there was a Supreme Court decision involving the county of Maui. They were discharging to the ground and it was effectively making its way to the ocean almost directly through subsurface tunnel. And they were sued for doing that and went through the lower courts, ended up in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court made a decision that what the county of Maui was doing was a functional equivalent of a direct discharge to a federally navigable water, which is the language that you would have to NPDES. We don't know how much that is really relevant for us, because there was no bright line test created as part of that judgment. I mean, they did a very good job, the Supreme Court did a very good job getting into the technical, if you're ever into reading Supreme Court decisions, but they did not create a bright line. They created several factors that could be considered in that process, and then left it up to the EPA designated regulators, which in our case is the regional board. No one has had that conversation officially as it pertains to EPS.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Tom. All right, so this is the part that's actually starting to get pretty cool. So the process that we're gonna try and use here is we're gonna look at what we're calling a universe of treatment ideas. There's a ton of different stuff out there. There's stuff that are 30-year mature technology. There's things that are 5-year mature technology. There's things with several installations in the United States. There's things with 0 installations in the United States. We're looking at all of those things based on discussions we've had. There's not a high likelihood that things with 0 installations in the United States are gonna make it, which is the funneling effect that you see here. So we're hoping to end up with 4 primary options, one of which is the existing plan to rehab and rehabilitate the existing facilities. And then again, final recommendation is gonna be 10% level. So these are the evaluation criteria that we got with working with Corolla. So there's economic, technical, environmental, footprint, constructability, coordination with future improvements and regulatory requirements, and operability and maintenance. So there's always an opportunity at this point for board feedback. If you guys look through this and you think you might have another metric or you might have a rewording of a metric, we're still at a phase where that's an opportunity. If you want to just communicate that by email or listen during the meeting, we can definitely incorporate that.
So something you touched on, I'm curious if it's captured here. Was that there's some technologies, so let's say our waste discharge requirements are set at a certain level today, but they get more stringent. Future mentioned that maybe some technologies that are more readily scalable, to do a higher level of treatment or to add additional levels of treatment. Is that concept captured?
Yeah, we'll get into there's subcategories for each of these.
Okay.
But it would likely fall into the coordination of future improvements and regulatory requirements for them. So and there's a weighting process as well. So it's pretty cool. I'm really impressed with what Cole put together for us as far as and taking something that feels very subjective and making it as objective as possible.
Right.
So it's a good exercise.
Is there a component, I mean, theoretically, if we move to a different technology, is there a component that might be in technical, which would be education and training for the staff?
As far as being required for.
Yeah.
That's a good question. What do you think, Jim?
Well, that would probably get captured in O&M costs and
There you go.
requirements.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, there's opportunities to talk about these main categories, but then there's subcategories that they're pretty easy to add, and, the way they've got it put together with a spreadsheet, it's just, you add it, and then it becomes incorporated in the calculation, so it's pretty cool. Go ahead, Michelle. So this is just kind of sub-criteria, that we were looking at, so you see the capital O&M, on economic, technical, so a lot of stuff you're talking about, action, losses removal, proven technology, that's where that comes in. Reliance on chemicals, we talked about bleach today, that's an expensive chemical, can we get away from that, I don't know. You know, is it worth spending hours of the facility that don't use bleach, even, you know, it's gonna take 50 years to spend that much on bleach, I don't know. Those are the questions that we're asking here. Environmental hazardous use, we talked about getting rid of chlorine gas, that would have been in that decision metrics. The footprint, again, as I mentioned earlier, where's this thing gonna go? If it's rehab, do we have to move any facilities? Do we have to, what are we gonna do, when we have to add a new pump and the electrical facilities maybe can't accommodate that? So even in the event that we're discussing a complete rehab as planned, there's still some substantial work we're gonna have to address. Next. Constructability, that's an easy one to forget, but we've got, some subcategories in there, so the complexity of the build, what can go on? Can the facility continue to run in normal operation while we're building? Is there seasonal constraints, all those things, coordination with future improvements, so as you had mentioned, Blake, we are considering, is the technology going to be able to meet a potential future NPDES requirement? It is a doable exercise to sit down, knowing what is well known about how NPDES permits are generated, how those water quality limitations are created. You can sit down and create what your theoretical limits might be. They're very low. They're very, very, very low, technologically difficult. So that is definitely something where part of this, the previous study is also going to include, you know, if we end up in a position where they're talking about limitations on the rivers and the creek, do we get any credits? Do we get any dilution credits? Because there's water that is in the aquifer prior to us discharging. Do we get dilution credits for that? That might actually ease some burdens. So there's a side benefit of the prior study. O&M, that's a big thing for the future. Automation, night operations, 24-hour operations, staff safety, all those things are big time considerations. So, we're looking at that. So this is just a kind of a blurb of one of those. There's a very interesting sheet that we can provide you guys if you're ever interested. It's very preliminary at this phase. But effectively color-coded, so you're looking at it. Each of these sub-criteria will get a score based on some objective comparative information and give it a rating based on that. And then at the end of the day, you add everything up and see how they compare. As objective as it can possibly be. And then you're left with competitors, so to speak. So you're looking at this and you see this has got a large blue, it won in technical by a long ways, right? So we'll hopefully have some graphics that we'll be able to use and make some educated decisions instead of just kind of guessing. Okay,
Yeah, Jason, just before we leave the evaluation criteria. I'm wondering, does carbon footprint belong in here? In some fashion,
It's in there.
What's that?
it was in environmental emissions carbon footprint.
Emissions, okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's very good, thank you, Dan.
And kind of along that line, I know we use a lot of electricity. Would that be captured in that same?
Yes. Yeah.
subcategory.
Yeah, and so from the environmental perspective, the electricity consumption as far as our carbon footprint is concerned, but also if one selection might require substantial infrastructure improvements to electrical versus another not requiring it as much, that would be captured in the economic.
Yeah, yeah.
Just while we're on the, I really like the way you guys have broken out all this, I was trying to think what you'd missed and was really struggling to find anything.
Yeah,
It seems like you've got a lot of great criteria in there. You know, under the economic, I know that we're looking at a big ticket, no matter what we do. And, one way to offset that cost is through grants. And so I wonder, is there certain options that are more grant available versus not grant available? And I guess that just gets folded into the capital. There's not a breakout on grant funding eligibility or something like that, but I assume maybe that gets rolled in somehow when you're looking at that. That would just be one other factor, if there really is, if you're gonna.
There's a substantial difference between two technologies that their grant eligibility.
Okay,
Definitely.
all right, so I guess whether that gets incorporated into the economics, or it's a subset of
Yeah.
the capital cost, looking at the potential grant eligibility. Might be one other thing to include in there.
Yeah, there is a lot of opportunity. And fortunately, fortunately, but also unfortunately, we have done a lot of that legwork to this point. We're doing that legwork now. We're looking very extensively at a lot of options for treatment in the facility that will meet the requirements of specific laws within the state, assist the local community in meeting care compliance requirements for those while benefiting the agency. So we're looking for any kind of win-win we can on that, because a lot of those opportunities, those provide grants, those provide substantial funding,
Okay,
either debt forgiveness or funding offsets.
and then. You have the one slide there, the scoring tool. I know that, our second touch point is sort of that funnel area where you're bringing the world of alternatives. And so maybe I'm ahead of myself here, but it seems like, there's a lot of different unit processes that when I look at the flow chart, how you guys distill the alternatives into, it just seems like there'd be a lot of different different scenarios that incorporate different elements, and how many different alternatives do you actually envision looking at, the ability to kind of.
I think we just started with 7 or 8. 8.
Okay,
And what we ended up with, and it was a really good workshop, because we did identify that one of the alternatives is something that could actually be used in conjunction with another technology.
right,
So we have had those conversations. We have narrowed and culled a little bit based on that, but at this point, we're assessing those 7 or 8 different options and scoring them based on this
okay.
to allow us to get to a clean top 4. Or top 3 really good results, because one of them is rehab.
And so just maybe I'm jumping ahead again. Our next touch point, you guys will have taken the criteria, looked at the 8 options, and then sort of give us the process you went through and be presenting the top
3 plus rehab.
3 plus just kind of upgrading our existing plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, when you do these kind of criteria matrix, I've done it oftentimes, you're equally, if every one of those criteria has a 1 through 5, you end up weighting everything kind of equally. A lot of times there's a kind of weighting factor thing, if,
There it is, yeah.
and so you guys have the ability to do that,
Yes.
and something might win that
That's
has
correct.
a whole bunch of good scores in an area that really maybe isn't as important to
Yeah.
the agency, and as another one that has good scores there, but not
That's
there,
correct.
so,
Yeah, there is an opportunity for weighting.
okay,
So, and that has definitely been part of the discussions, is what gets weighted where, The issue is, want to remain as objective as you possibly can.
Right.
But it's the silent voice in the back of your head telling you to weight certain things a certain way so that you get the outcome you're looking for. We're really trying to, at this stage, if we come out with any scenarios where it's like, wow, how do we end up with the most expensive option being ranked number one?
Right.
We will definitely take a look at our weight, see if there's any place that's being skewed. There's opportunity. Okay, and with board input as well, after you guys have an opportunity to see the metrics, a little bit of the numbers, not set in stone with that. And we still have lots of opportunity for input.
Great.
As I mentioned, Pro also took a look at the flow projections that they did during 2022. You're gonna see a lot of the same graphs and information that we talked about with the connection fee and the rate increase, and wow, look at that, flows aren't going up as much as we want. So let's get prepared for that. So they reviewed all the data for each of the districts, determined the rates of growth. This is information provided by the individual districts, and then the future projections. So as you can see, flat-ish, seasonally, but it ain't growing, it ain't growing. Once again, that's a discussion we've had as part of the other rates studies. And yeah, this one's actually really interesting because it gives you a good idea of the information that we all have to work with. You know, the master plan showed, hey man, that's growing. You know, it was definitely trending up. You move into the green 2019 and now it dropped or plateaued. So mysterious, I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting anecdote because all of us perceive that there's a lot more people here than there used to be, and yet these numbers are showing. So.
Actually, because of all the low flow toilets.
Low floor toilets, same
In Squaw Valley.
All right, so, yeah, and just to show you the difference. So this is the master plan, projected for now. And this is the now. And you can see they're all substantially lower than we were supposed to be by now. The data that Crow had to work with at the time indicated we would be 1.06 million gallons more than we are currently, which is interesting. Thanks. Yeah, just a little bit more of the same picture.
We define the BWF.
It's base water flow. Correct. Base water flow. So it's normalized, right?
Basically, the contribution from, that you see 365 days a year.
Right.
Comes in from.
Without seasonality.
So this doesn't level the low.
We'll get there. Yeah, we're on the way.
Okay, great.
Oh, yeah.
And again, same story, but, yeah, and here's the, this is basically where the information about the plan documents from. Each individual member agency has the information based on, their master planning and their projections, and so that's the information that Crow has to work with. And so these are the average growth from those different agencies. And it's just an example here using North Tahoe's projections to show how we got up with the dry weather and flow contribution. Yeah, so we've got the revised, so the updated existing reflects, because we're starting from a lower point, the projected point 2045 is lower than we were seeing, but we're projecting 45% growth in flows between now and 2045. And again, this is just a graphical representation. See, we're starting lower. The initial assumption was by 2023 using master plan data that we'd be at 3.63. We're actually at 2.56. So if you look out to 2045, that projects 3.72 instead of 5.
And is our 9.6 permit, that's not a base water flow number.
That's
a
it.
different charge. We're not, that's a third of or quarter of our capacity. And so those are apples and orange numbers.
Kind of, yes,
Okay.
because that's a dry weather flow, that's,
Okay.
we use the dry weather 9.6 as our ceiling for hydraulic wastewater received. The winter flows are different because of
Right,
different aspects.
but the base water flow is an important parameter from a treatment perspective. That's
Yeah,
where the-
from a design perspective, yeah.
Okay.
It's also important, I mean, we've had this discussion already, I think we know the master plan. Was not a done, set in stone thing, it's something that we're gonna revisit on a regular basis. And we just have to be aware that these are 2024 projections, we're gonna be looking 2028 or 2029 projections, and we're gonna have some potentially different numbers. So this is what we have to work with at this point. And yeah, this is the reduction from what the master plan had assessed compared to what we're actually seeing. So it's 27% less 2045 projected. Which is interesting. It plays into the discussion of this whole thing because the hydraulic isn't as big of a discussion as we thought it was gonna be. Maybe we're talking more about nutrients than we are about hydraulic flows. So it's an important portion of the picture. Okay, now we're gonna do as we said, flows are not going up the way that we assumed. So again, gray represents the data from the master plan. And this is the most recent 4 years, 3 years. And it's flat, effectively, statistically. Okay. TSS, COD, BOD, which is carbon, has slightly increased. Same story we heard when we were talking about rates, and we were talking about the 200 gallons per day not representing, but it does represent the load. So this continues on its normal trend. Same with total nitrogen and total phosphorus, which are the two primary things we're concerned with this study. And here's the projections compared to the old projections compared with the new projections. So those are all lower as well. So it was a really important, it ended up being a very important process to go through and look at this. So this changes the planning horizon a bit.
So these are basically the background assumptions that are gonna be used.
Yeah.
For the alternatives analysis.
And I would mention though, that an important aspect of these assumptions is that we know that in a 3 or 4 year period of time, they can change. So we won't be saying this is what it is, we'll be likely saying that impacts decisions, but it is not critical decision making. This is something we need to keep our finger on the pulse. Okay. And then the process capacity analysis, just a revisitation of what they did in the 2022 report. You can see the red bottlenecks there. That's what all of our eyes go to. So even with the new revised 7.12 million gallons in 2045, we still see the NRD nitrification as being a pretty substantial bottleneck. And the digesters and salts are still representing the bottleneck. All right, well, you had already mentioned like the next steps. So by the next board meeting, we're gonna have some screening results. And we'll have an opportunity to discuss how we got to there, whether everyone feels it was appropriate, we got to where we got, whether everyone can get on board with the 4 options that we're looking at, one of which being rehab. And again, I want to reiterate, the opportunity exists at any time. If anyone has any input on this, please reach out. We can incorporate that input. We can answer questions, whatever's on your mind with these things. We're definitely available for this. If we don't know, Tim's a call away, so we'll call him and ask him. So we want to be as transparent and open and collaborative as we possibly can with this study. So the next step is going to be, we're going to come to you with our short list. So that's the floor.
So just for clarification, the conceptual design, 10%, is that just like an overview of whatever processes we choose?
Yeah, so the 10%, probably the most important aspect of the 10% is going to be locations of facilities. So it's gonna be, where do these things fit? How do they integrate into the current? You're not gonna get, you know, things like pipes aren't gonna be designed and pads aren't gonna be designed, but you're gonna have how facilities. Yeah, which is probably at this stage the most difficult question to answer, because we have a lot of topographical movement, it's an interesting facility location, so. All right, was there any other questions?
Yeah. Really good update, excited, what is your kind of anticipated timeline for that next check-in, is it 2 months, 3 months, 6 months?
No, it'll likely be 1 to 2 months.
Okay, you guys are moving fast.
We're moving along, yes. We want to make sure that we get everything we need out of it relatively quickly in the event that we have to start making decisions about what are we gonna do with this situation now. So,
And are there plans potentially to visit few facilities that would be utilized?
there are.
Yes, there is.
So at this point, we've kind of rested, and again, input is welcome. We rested on the idea, we were kind of mulling about the idea, do we visit several locations with different technologies? Or do we wait until we have a definitive selection or even maybe the short list prior to visiting those, and then visit several of the same technology locations? Because there's questions, everyone runs it a little differently. It would be nice to talk to a subsection of operators, say, hey, well, how does this thing actually operate? Do they come through with their promises when they design this thing? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? So right now, we're leaning a little bit more towards focusing on one technology and visiting a number of locations on that technology. Again, input's welcome. If you guys have any input on it.
Yeah, I certainly think, the theoretical technology is one side, the other side is talking to your peers, your guys' peers, and, a visit, certainly once you get the short list is good, but even in that evaluation process, if you're not doing a site visit, talking to, on the phone with your peers at facilities that have the technology you're exploring and just getting the boots on the ground, feedback from them is, I think, that really valuable, the articles and the theory is one thing, running the plants is super important. And so,
And we have a great resource in Corolla because they have, they're all over the country. They've been involved with designing and building several of these facilities, running hot connections at those facilities that they provide us. So yes, it's.
And before you look at any of these facilities, do you see what the data is on their output?
Yeah, we definitely can,
Look at that,
Mhm.
see if it's worthwhile to go look at.
Exactly, yeah. And we want to, and again, you're right. Well, we want to make this as impactful as possible. We don't want to just wander around some facility and it turns out, oh, this was a fun, this was a done. We would like to know as much as we can from Corolla.
super,
I got a question here, about this report, and I'm trying to get my train of thought together here, and, I didn't know whether or not I should bring it up under director's comments, or this would be an appropriate agenda item to bring it up under, but, we've been, given a lot of information from Carrillo about our treatment process and how we're trying to stay on the cutting edge of the industry. And there's one thing that I might have missed it, but I don't think I did, is that we talked about everything through our treatment process except for one thing. And that one thing is our sludge. What are we gonna do with our sludge if Lockwood shuts the door on us? Now, this happened about, I can't remember, 5, 6, 8 years ago. I don't know, Mike, maybe you can help me.
Closer to 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, our sludge depository, so to speak, they closed the door on us. And for this agency to be able to get rid of its hazardous waste is, I think, a very important situation in our overall operation. If we can't get rid of our hazardous waste, our sludge, our cakes, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna address this? We're looking at our treatment process being on the cutting edge into the future, all the way out to 2045 or whatever. But if Lockwood closes its doors, which is entirely possible, what are we gonna do with our sludge? What are we gonna do with our cakes? How are we gonna keep our operation moving without being able to transport our hazardous waste to a disposal site? You know, California is not gonna have a disposal site. We are on borrowed time with Lockwood, I think. I don't know if we got a contract or how we got our agency set up to get rid of the cakes. But this is something that hasn't been addressed by Carrillo. It hasn't been addressed in our surplus land study. I might have missed it, but I don't think I did. But I think this is an issue that we should not overlook. Because if we can't get rid of our hazardous waste, we are in a very significant negative situation. And like I say, I don't know if this is a proper agenda item to bring it up.
That's a
or
good
whether-
time, Dale.
What's that?
I think this is a good time and maybe we'll give them a chance to respond.
And I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, but this is a very important part of our operation that, like I say, I might have missed it, but it hasn't been addressed in any of the studies, any of the data that we've had before the board, and I don't know what I'm asking for. Am I asking for a solution? Am I asking for Carrillo to address this problem or this possibility? But I think we're gonna be negligent in our function as a board if we don't address the possibility of having Lockwood shut the doors.
Very, very true.
I mean, what are we gonna do? Haul our sludge up?
Hold on, Dale. Let them answer. I think you asked the question.
So to hopefully ease your mind, so when we did go through this 10, 12 years ago, when we went through, Lockwood actually changed they basically closed one of their sites down. They were accepting some of their refuges and they moved it. And when we went through that, we also went through a trucking hauling contract increases. And Gerlach also became unviable for us to take our solid waste. And when that happened, we did an evaluation at that time. And we also found out at that time that Bentley Ranch opened their doors to start to take more of our our biosolids so that they could use that for soil amendment. So that became a viable option for us to be able to take our soil or our solids to. But at the same time, when we were having discussions with Lockwood through Cabin Creek, kind of is how that went because they are our hauler. They assured us at that time with that new facility that they had opened, take refuge and take our biosolids. They had at that time predicted 100 years worth of storage capacity at the Lockwood area that they had opened up. So it really kind of, eased our minds that, okay, we've got, a reasonable amount of time in, 100 years worth of storage capacity, 10 years ago. So still, probably 90 years worth of storage capacity left at Lockwood. And we only send a small portion of our biosolids to Lockwood right now. And I do know that Bentley Ranch is, under transition right now because it is up for sale. We don't know what's gonna happen with that. They could end up developing that land and not taking our biosolids there. But we do have Lockwood as our backup for our biosolids to go to, and we would have, what was estimated at the time, another 90 years of capacity so that we could send our biosolids to Lockwood. So, hopefully that eases your mind a little bit, that we do have places to take it. And there's also other alternatives that we would look at if something happened, to process our biosolids, so that it was still something that could be used for soil amendment, and, you know, it's a benefit back to the environment for growing, hay and stuff like that. So,
You've eased my mind somewhat. However, when it comes to hazardous waste, nothing,
it's not.
nothing is out there 90 years. I'm sorry. The 90-year projection or the 100 years that we talked about 10 years ago,
Dale,
it's,
I wanna just, I mean, you're referring to hazardous waste has a very distinct definition.
Yes,
Mike's referring to it as biosolids, which is the right term.
they are not.
I would really coach you, because hazardous waste can be a very alarming, triggering thing to tell people we're hauling hazardous waste. If you go back to your board, or you're talking to members of the public, the agency is not generating hazardous waste. The stuff coming out of the solids handling is not
get it.
classified as biosolids, is the proper term.
Well, thank you, like, I thought that's exactly what I was gonna say.
I stand corrected, but the issue
Of where it goes is still an issue.
the issue at hand is whether or not we get the door closed at Lockwood or any other facility in Nevada. And what are we gonna do? It's never been addressed. It's never been discussed. It's never been part of anything that we've had before us. It's just a question that I have in the back of my mind.
It sounds like staff has looked into this, you know, and feels confident in the, you know, long-term availability of Lockwood as a destination for this material.
But obviously I have others.
And Bentley Ranch at the time is a viable.
Right.
Like you said,
that's where.
we're sending about 95% of our biosolids to Bentley Ranch, where it's come,
It's a soil amendment, right?
it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's not hazardous waste, it's a actual nutrient.
Yeah.
Source. We have a residential community, we don't have any industry here. You know, there's still people that have lots of stigmas in society about a waste.
I get it.
But the reality is, it's actually a valuable commodity that even if Bentley Ranch closes, somebody, I'm thinking, is gonna find an economic reason to wanna take our biosolids to, you know, for agricultural purposes. So, and I did notice, Dale, in their metrics of criteria and sub-criteria, that under technical, there is a box there called impacts to solids handling. So hopefully, some of the questions you're raising, you know, and I don't know whether this one, if the closure of Lockwood applies to all technology. I mean, if you have a technology that somehow does create a hazardous waste because you're injecting it with some chemical to take out the nutrient, nitrogen and phosphorus, that I would think would come in here and would require different solids handling, but
Well, let me just say first, Dale, you're right. It's a pinch point, it's a vulnerability, and it's something that we have of late been aware of ourselves. So it's definitely something that's on our radar. And I think the key to what we would like to do, and this is opportunity for a broader discussion, probably in another meeting, we can agendize it, and kind of create we're looking at options to change the dynamic of this being waste to this being a commodity. A lot of places in California are already doing this. There's technologies that modify the solids to turn them into stuff that farmers are fighting for.
Oh, yeah.
So
You
that's-
know, 10 years ago, when we had this discussion, we talked about putting together a compost facility on this site. And, you know, Lane Lewis having the golf course, he was all over it because he could have used it to fertilize his golf course.
Yeah.
And not that there's a whole lot of farmers around here, but, there could be a use, but we don't need to get into that. I just, wanted to call to your attention, Carilla's attention, and to the board's attention that, we have an untouched, portion of the study that I think should be at least looked at, other than the little box that Blake was saying to what's in that little box.
Right.
As part of the discussion, we haven't heard
Yeah.
it, but
Duly noted feedback. I think this is good feedback. I think that we can commit to providing more information on this.
yeah.
And I think this was the right time to bring it up, Dale,
Yeah.
so I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, it's, like I say, I thought about, the surplus land, you know, and not seeing anything within the study that Carrillo did about our standby SAT, about all the things that they covered. They didn't cover the one thing, and that's an issue I brought up, so, am I asking for personally, some kind of dialogue or some kind of an answer, or I think that Mike covered it. But I'd like to just say, when it comes to, this kind of issue, I would venture not to be totally convinced that we have a 90-year place to take care of our offsite waste.
Mike, is that the biosolids that's called the Lockwood, is that daily cover or is that just buried as waste?
It's typically buried as waste.
Okay,
And we want to get away from that word.
okay, great.
The narrative that we want to continue with is reuse as much as we possibly can in every instance that we possibly can. I mean, just to wet your whistle, Gail, there's technologies now that you can actually take your biosolids, generate electricity off.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then you've got a product that's even marketable after that. We are at the very, very preliminary early stages of even thinking about those kinds of things, but it is on our radar.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Tim, I don't know if, appreciate you coming up and listening in and hearing directly the comments. Anything you need to add to that conversation?
Okay,
Okay,
excited to get to the next step, there's gonna be a couple of details, long, process. Meetings where we got all the criteria and all the alternatives. So we'll find everybody in the same room. Camera it all out.
super. Okay, so that was a progress update, a little bit of discussion and possible direction from the board. Anything else from anybody else on this one before we move on?
No, that's the update.
Seeing nothing yet. Great presentation. Thank you, Jason. On to something way more exciting, review of the agency insurance coverage.
So at the last, regular board meeting, Director Wilkins, posed a question on our insurance coverage. So attached in your board packet was a summary of our coverages. I do not claim to be an insurance expert, so I want to get it in front of you guys. See what questions you might have so that I could, jot those down and then get with our insurance representative to get answers, or if there's any concerns about coverage amounts. Anything like that, just have a discussion and then you get staff direction with that.
Right.
And was this what you were looking for? And
Yeah, this is very helpful. I was just, curious. How much we're, kind of what type of insurance we have. And I think this gives a good summary. So. I think the first line item, is that general liability?
yes,
Okay. And so that's a $15 million. $15,750,000. Total coverage amount. And that's kind of like this, like catch all, if I understand general liability.
Yeah, it looks like, covers errors and omissions on our part, so staff errors or omissions.
So that's, and we spent 64,000 a year on that, and looks like we spent 127,000 a year on workers' comp. And then the 357,000, is that basically on our buildings and our land?
General property, yeah, so that's what we are charged with, the coverage of 279 million.
Okay. So if there was, I guess, question, if there was a major earthquake in the area and we sustained significant damage to our plant facility as a result, that we do we know if, you know, that property insurance would cover that kind of event?
I'll have to ask.
Okay.
Earthquake is often an exclusion in property. We have to get an earthquake endorsement. There have lots of constraints on them, but yeah, I'm not seeing earthquake called out.
Right, yeah, I would assume, like, we had, if there was some kind of major fire that destroyed, you know, multiple buildings here, and I think our buildings are generally constructed of materials that are not highly combustible. So I think, you know, the likelihood of that is very low.
Correct, and I do know that's the case, that you guys recall, we had the fire incident, so we did reach out at that time to see if the removal of the damaged trees was covered under our insurance coverage. In that case, it wasn't because of the offs, while it was on our property, it wasn't part of our developed or, you know, developed property portion. They had said, like, had that been a landscape area that we had developed and were maintaining, then it would have been covered along with any buildings and such.
So kind of like the passive open space type land that we own.
Yeah,
It doesn't have coverage for fire damage, but if we had, I don't know, one of the people, you know, one of the campers like injured themselves on our property and then sued us over it, right? Then we, in general liability, would cover that kind of event if they were successful.
I will reach out and ask specifically on the earthquake coverage. Since this is through CSRMA possibility, it's different than what we see on our normal homeowners policies.
Right.
And if not, we'll ask, is that coverage even available to us?
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense to have it or not, or what we have, I was just. I can't remember what triggered the question in my.
Well, outside of the wildfire is probably our next highest likelihood of a banner, so
damage, right?
I do know that APIP, so that Alliant Property Insurance, we did a huge packet. So it's includes all the structures on the property. So that's what Richard was just talking about, the trees are not included as part of the structures.
Right.
So we have to review that packet of all the structures to go through and make sure, you know, if there were any repair or any rehabs that we did within the year, we have to, you know, make sure that we include any upgrades to the property that were done, so they can include those upgrades and increase whatever the property values were on those policies that we did.
I'd be very curious about the earthquake rider, because of just the nature of the facility, they could really do some damage. And breaking tanks and breaking, boundaries. That'd be a good one to know about.
And then there's I noticed there's the cyber liability. I'd be curious what that does and does not cover. You know, because there's, you know, if you get hacked, there's different types of damages that can occur. You know, we may have certain customer information, you know, that if someone were to gain access to it, you know, creates a security breach for our customers. And I don't know if there's liability, what liability is associated with that, and whether this cyber liability coverage covers us in that, but then there's also like the whole where a hacker will get into your system and basically lock down all your data, or take control of your SCADA system potentially and lock that down, and then basically will charge you a ransom to unlock it. And I don't know, like this cyber coverage, does it, you know, because then if that happens, then there's specialists that come in to see if they can, you know, to work through that issue one way or another. So I'd just be curious what that cyber liability coverage does and doesn't.
Okay. We'll get a summary of the specifics for that. I do know that was a fairly new coverage that they have been offering, and then if you get included above, they lumped it in with some pre-existing coverage.
Yeah, we'll get the details of what it covers. And I do know we have some other, coverages via, for bank services provider, government services that Booth oversees. That we'll add that into just to give the specifics of what we're covered for and note that it's under a separate, through a separate insurance. Right. Then there's this Alliant Mobile Vehicle Program. Is that? That's all of our equipment.
Insurance.
Correct, yeah.
And then Richard, I understand that you indicate our coverage limits, our deductible, if you have to pay up front. And then there's a retention numbers there. What does the retention represent?
I do not know.
Okay.
I'll add that to the list of inquiries. And then the other thing I noted is there's some kind of, it's like board. This public official bond. Do we know what that is? I'll ask on that one as well. It's like there's something that each. Scott's got $100,000 limit.
I think that's all 5 of us.
Yeah, what's up with that, Scott?
Yeah.
It's just my goal.
Yeah, no, he's just more liable.
Because
I think that's.
I'm not sure why Scott's is 100, like they should have all been 20,000. I remember reviewing this before with, Shanahan, and maybe Josh can give us an update on it. But what I was told by Shanahan is that for our agency act, that it's required by the state for each board member to have a bond, whatever is required by the act, as required by the act for the agency as to be covered. And I think it's just in addition to not just, I'm assuming you're looking at this too, but addition to errors and omissions and employment practice liability, it's additional. So not just as employees of a board, but as a public servant. So it covers additional practices. I don't know if you can speak to more of that, Josh.
You've actually covered that pretty well. It is a legal requirement and for public officials to be bonded in case of any error or omission. I mean, it's just pretty much that straightforward. So it's a compliance issue, and so having that bond is important on each director.
So how would that? What's a practical application of how that bond? What's a scenario where that bond would be used for something?
The most likely example, and frankly, it's not that likely just because, you know, you have broad discretion, but if somebody brought a fiduciary claim against the board and recognize that you are all fiduciaries, so you misspent public funds, for example, you basically gifted public funds on something that's not within the agency's purpose and somebody sued, this would help cover those damages if there were any.
No, Dan?
No, I think that's it.
I think this was a great thing to look at.
We'll do the research on questions and we get back to it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Richard. All right, item 9, review approval of amended legal services agreement with BKS.
Yeah, so this is the same agreement that we executed with Andrew when he became the primary counsel. This places Josh in that role as primary counsel. Other than that, no other changes to the agreement that was in place prior. I know one point that was added in the prior agreement was that any rate increases would be board approved. That remains in there as well. Just to point that out. Great. Thank you. So this requires action. It does.
Any other questions of the agreement? It sounds like it's, yeah, pretty much a rollover from the previous one, but just identifying the rates specifically for Josh.
Correct.
I'll entertain a motion. Also moved by Director Smelser. Seconded by Wilkins. Any other comments? Not, all in favor of approving this legal services agreement, say aye. 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 All right, Josh.
Thank you.
Are we good to move on to the team report at this point? All right. Let's keep it going then. Mike, yeah.
Hi, good morning, Board of Directors again. For the month of June, all plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. For the monitoring and reporting report, there was one of 4 biological oxygen demands or BOD samples that were not reported due to a quality control issue in the lab. We had power disruption and it played around with the incubator and we weren't able to use that number. And that non-compliance was reported to the Haunting Board. For the plant itself, performed well through the month. We did more public relations tours and we did a lot of plant cleanup. The guys are doing a great job and going out and cleaning up areas that been a little bit disheveled for some time now, moving some stuff around, get ready for to get rid of some old equipment. Work orders 4 that were completed and 3 pending. Any questions for I'm sorry, also there was some interest in costs from the finance committee meeting yesterday in costs of fuel oil for the boilers, that what that costs to make up for our methane gas that we use to generate our steam and our heat for the plant and for the digesters. So I went back for 2 years. I went back for complete years for 2022 and 2023. For the 2022 year, it was estimated that about $28,000, well, $29,000 was spent in fuel oil costs for the boilers, for fuel oil going to the boilers to make up that comfort steam and heat for the digestion system. And for the year 2023, it was estimated about $26,000. So offset what we didn't make in natural gas or methane gas that we produce in the digesters. Is there any other questions on that? Did you need to know anything else? Other than that, any questions for the operations department?
Okay, thanks, Mike.
We have, Paul is, on vacation today, so Luke Swan, our, IT supervisor is stepping in.
Yeah, good morning, Board of Directors. Yeah, Luke Swan, IT Supervisor. So filling in for Paul today. Try and give a best report as possible for the maintenance department. So project support for the month of June, we worked and finished up a sodium hypochlorite project. So that's running all the software, and obviously field installation is finished with that. We're still continuing our warehouse inventory project. Right now, we are in the middle of our SCADA server upgrade project. Actually, like, we've been working on that as we speak. So fortunately, it hasn't impacted any of our current networking or cyber stuff right now. So they're doing a good job with that. Digestion improvements project is ongoing. Nutrient removal project, obviously coordinating with the technical services department. We're also, you probably saw when you came to the front gate. The front gate is under construction. The consultant is here today, contractor is here today, and so we're hoping to finish that up as we speak. So hopefully that'll be on next month's report that it is finished. And yeah, it looks like we have server upgrade project in there twice, but SCADA servers are ongoing with that. So any questions on any of the ongoing servers or any ongoing projects?
So the sodium hypochlorite, that's complete now.
is, I would guess, and the question is yes and no. It is complete. It is, yeah, the operation of it is complete. There are other different yield items that are being cleaned up and finished, but that are not impacting the current operation. So I'm sure Richard.
Yeah, it's online. I think there's some punch list items,
Yeah.
you know, things that are still doing the finishing touches on it, but it is operational, and the rental tanks that we've been renting are offsite and no longer on rent.
Moving on, so maintenance, so plant maintenance activities, so maintenance staff is currently working for normal PM tasks around the plant. We have created the primary scum pump to a new CPEX pump. There'll be some pictures upcoming in the report also. We talked about this earlier in the board meeting, completed the annual TRI visual inspection. They walked the line. The reports repaired some broken welds on the headworks washing press on the Uber installation. The IT department's been working on permit form migration update. Still more work on that to come. They installed the TWAS VFD HIM standing for human interface module. It's for control of VFD for pumping. Completed the filter press and feed pump installation. Repaired some shorted washing press solenoid valves on the same piece of equipment as the broken weld. Also same piece of equipment on that. For the E&I department, we met earlier, these 2 E&I technicians started, so they were actually doing training on the 8th, but they were doing hazardous. I can't think of asphalt. I'm not asphalt. Training for first week, and then their first day on site was this Monday. So did that. Completed the sale of the Cat 950F loader. There'll be a picture of that in the packet also. And then also be more pictures of the first responder training for rappelling and rope training. The maintenance group attended some CPEX pump training. And one thing I did add to the list that wasn't on there was that we did have a new IT specialist start on June 26th. And that was with Sue, who introduced himself earlier also.
So we filled 3 positions.
Yeah, 3 positions. Yeah, 2 E&I technicians and 1 IT specialist.
Are they local, or do they commute up, out of curiosity?
From what I understand, all 3, yeah,
We know.
yeah, one of them was the IT specialist, Lucas. He did work in California before, but he was north in Susanville.
Lucas, yeah.
I believe he's living up there, but since then has moved down to Reno and commuting to Trout.
Awesome.
So yeah, open recruitments, we're still at one open recruitment for an IT specialist, so ongoing talks with Paul and Rich on how we're filling that position. For work orders, the backlog is decreasing slightly, and you can see the number of work orders completed, and that's all I have.
Nice. You have some photos here. Photos, so that's the Cat 950 leaving the facility. So people are happy about that. From what I talked to Paul briefly about what replaced it, I'm unsure.
Local sale?
I'm not sure. Richard relationship or Shelby, yeah.
How much should we get for it?
47. So sold to a reseller, for $47,000.
Wow.
So what they sold it for, I don't know, but
Right.
Now it's 17,000 more than we would have got trade.
Okay.
and they paid a buyer's premium on top of that, so they paid actually 57, and we got 47.
Gotcha.
Now, we replaced that piece of equipment,
Yeah, we did.
Correct. Yeah,
comparable?
from what I understand, yes.
Okay.
We did downsize a little bit, that's 950, we went to 938, just because of the newest, new technology on the 930. The current 938 is as capable as the old 950. So it's nice, that one used to develop black smoke every time you hit the problem on the new one, just all you hear is a wisp of air.
Yeah, so here's some pictures of the first responder training, practicing rappelling and rope practice. So there's Anthony down there. This is the CPEX pump training, and then on the right hand side is the new CPEX installation for the TWAS pump. That left hand side is Philip, one of our long-standing E&I technicians. He performs some PMs on the plant effluent analyzers, pH, and et cetera. And then, the return the right is the wash, as well, as I mentioned earlier. Your repair. That's all.
Thank you, Luke. Jason?
Good morning again. So on the engineering side, we, pretty well discussed the insurance movement, so I'll skip that one. Digestion improvements project, so we are at a phase where we're determining heating demands for the facility, so we're doing a complete, cataloging of all the facilities that need to be kept at what temperatures, including the digesters. So out of that, we're likely to get a little bit more of a picture on the boiler sizing. We've had some extensive discussions. We were provided with a technical memo that gave us pros and cons for different locations for the new boilers. We're still kind of sussing through that a little bit, but progressing well on track. TRI Alpine Meadows, Olympic Valley Rehab on the TRI. We are moving pretty quickly through that one as well. We're into a pretty deep, we're working with IT to create a landing page on our website so we can provide a link for the public, and we're now reaching out to the next tier of interested parties, which is going to include Olympic and Alpine and anyone that's impacted on the TRI. Making our way towards this thing getting hopefully lined in September 25. So we're still on track. It is a very tight schedule, but we are on the track at this point. In the lab, yeah, as Michael mentioned, we had a power dip that kind of nuked our BOD incubator, and that the run that was in it got damaged. So we were unable to report the results. We're in the process. So that's the pending corrective action you see down there. I want to point out right now, there is tons and tons of standard operating procedures that need to be revised because of something called the method update rule that the federal government requires. So Kristen Davis has been slaving away on those. There's about 8 of them that need to be pretty substantially rewritten, and they're all about 15 or 20 pages a piece. So there's and it's nothing better than technical writing. So it's also my understanding that the finance committee had some questions about contract lab work that we have sent out. So effectively, we have work that exists at such a low frequency that the infrastructure and instruments and the exotic gases and stuff that we would require to have, it's nowhere near penciling out. So examples would be volatiles, volatile VOCs, we call them, volatile organic compounds. Requires, you know, a $400,000 plus instrument, and we run it quarterly on like 8 locations. So the math will not come out on that. Also metals, any kind of metals analysis, similar situation, we just don't analyze it at a frequency that would make sense for that. And then we do some soil sampling with Tiger, and those soil samples are very, very specialized. Doing a solid matrix like that is no longer water at that point. So we have to actually send some of those samples down to Southern California. So, yeah, it's an economic thing. We send out things because it's not gonna make sense. There is potentially opportunities in the future to pick up some things maybe. And we're in discussions with that, but again, the cost savings need to be there.
Thanks. Yeah. The general fund warrants, it was Silver State Labs, the one that came to our attention. So thanks for the explanation on that, Dan.
Curious, Jason, for the DoD test that didn't work out, how many of those per month do we do?
Around 4.
So it's like once a week.
Yeah, basically. The way that it's worded in our permit is a little odd, so it ends up being on a Monday and Thursday alternating.
Oh.
So sometimes you'll have a week where there's no BOD, but it's just kind of.
Right, so we of our, 4 per month, 3 of them worked fine, 1 didn't.
Yeah, and it's a tricky one because the BOD is on the influence, there's no limit. It's not like we would get a result and it'd be too high. It's a requirement. There's a lot of things in our permit that
It's a data point.
we report it, and there's no real compliance nexus associated with it. We just need to report it.
Got it, okay.
Does the board know what BOD is?
Board of directors.
There's a lot of acronyms.
Oh, there's lots of acronyms,
I know what it means. I just,
Yeah,
I don't know whether.
BOD is biochemical oxygen demand. It's basically the amount of nutrients that are available for microbes to eat. And when they eat it, they consume oxygen. So that directly affects water bodies because fish need oxygen, microorganisms, everything in the river needs oxygen. So we take a little bottle, we put some sample in it, we measure the dissolved oxygen, we let it sit for 5 days, we read it again. We know how many of those things there are because of how much oxygen they consume. So it's called an assay, but yeah, it's
Simple process.
simple process. One of those tests we've been doing since we were
On
60s.
the Squaw Alpine TRI rehab, you were saying that's gonna be a sleeving?
We're not 100% sure yet what we're looking at anywhere from open excavation, which is not likely, but we are looking at it. All the way to CIPP and lining. There's also something called spiral bound lining, which if your flows are low enough, they offer you the benefit of not having to bypass. You can continue to run water through the pipe while you're doing it. There's drawbacks with it too, but right now, potentially the most likely is a cured in place pipe, sleeve that,
Sleeving it.
yes.
Now, is that pipe, cement pipe or is it ductile iron?
It's
Ductile iron goes under the river.
4 times in that spot, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a concrete line done for it.
It was.
Concrete's not
It
there.
was, but it's not anymore.
Right, the more the lining is worn away.
Yeah,
Now, that's the same type of wear that we saw on the River Ranch, Alpine Meadows.
That was concrete.
That was all about, changing elevation and that methane gas eating away at the top of the pipe.
Turbulence in the water.
Turbulence, yeah.
H2S, yep. But that was concrete pipe, not my understanding, not duct line.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason. Any other questions for technical services? Finance is next. Liz had a hard appointment, that she needed to go to, so I'm gonna take a stab at hers. Normal monthly AP, AR payroll, processes were completed. Finance committee meeting, continue to work on the, part of the bigger 25 budget and the budget book. We did have a staff member attend the GFOA conference. As far as building and customer service, just normal general assistance with the customer accounts. Interacting with 25-year tax roll stuff. And the delinquency stuff that we approved today. And there's some summaries of the connection fees paid for June, 80,000, and some inspections that were completed. Purchasing, we did their normal processes of purchasing items for staff. And then continues to provide front gate and front desk customer service. Any questions for the board finance standpoint? So we have a photo and inspection. Any questions for Richard regarding finance and admin? No? Okay. Thanks, Richard. Jump into mine. So we've been working with Gallagher to finalize the CFO/risk manager job description, so we can get it to the board for approval and then get it posted. Continue to talk about master plan stuff as you got the update on the secondary nutrient removal studies. Touch on that a little bit. Thinking based on some comments, which are great comments on biosolids that Jason alluded to, we've had some very recent conversations regarding those after attending a little presentation by North Star on a project that they're undertaking. And it might tie into a future for biosolids disposal for us, so we are looking into that, and perhaps as we provide an update on the boiler project, as that kind of dovetails into it. Maybe a second phase, we want to give a little bit more update on what those conversations have been lately, and maybe bring some presentations of what we've been looking at. There's improvements, Treasury Revitalization Steering Committee, local area general manager meeting. Kaylee was the one who attended the GFOA conference. We did hold a tour for Loomis Engineering who had helped us out on a interview panel, so we returned in favor of giving them an interview.
We had a Truckee Tahoe gravel ride that took place that used the right of entry on our facility. We did have a rib cook-off for staff, had some participants who cooked ribs and provided those for staff to enjoy. Well attended and everyone seemed to enjoy it and seemed to want to do it again. We're working on the annual newsletter, working on finalizing that to get it back out for some input to finalize to send out and actually do the mailing, not to that from the connection fee behind this. Looks like Rochelle attended the Civics Plus webinar on IT regarding platform migration and stuff. Recruitment continue, you've got to meet some new staff, we're down to the one for IT. That's a big relief getting some staff on board. Again, final budget, we look to bring the common class data to you in August, and just do the training, vacation, we weren't able to make July. We will be meeting the staff to share that information with them. Which leads me to, August will be a fairly loaded agenda. Because that will be on there as well as some other items. So we'll get that draft agenda out soon, but just wanted to get a little precursor to hopefully make sure that everyone has enough time. If we need to shorten it up a bit, then it's like we'll push to something. Bleach ribbon cutting, as we mentioned, the bleach project is online. We talked about doing a little ribbon cutting ceremony, acknowledging all the staff and all the work they put into it. We'd love to invite the board to come partake in that and see the facility now that's running. So we'll reach out for available dates to do that.
Would we want to invite members like NTPU or to that?
We certainly could. Part of that is I wanted to do a press release, board's approval. Try and highlight that and, maybe Sierra Sun would be interested in picking up an article. Kind of highlight the effort we did and the safety that we bring to the community by making that transition.
Yeah, since they're member organizations, I think it would be nice that at least have a representation.
Yeah, we can reach out to them as well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, who wanted to really cook off?
Well, there was a little snafu in that, everyone started grubbing on the ribs before we could separate food with food and do any kind of rating. So we're gonna redo it.
I won, Scott.
Yeah, Mike was convinced he won. And we had some people, they took it pretty serious. They actually took some vacation time in the morning to make sure that their ribs were top notch, so.
So we get another one.
Yeah, we owe it to do another one and actually declare a winner with a prize of some sort. And when we do that, we'll extend.
Did you know? Let's say you can invite board members.
Yeah. We will.
I didn't.
Yeah, next time you guys are gonna have
Pretty
to,
good.
check
this is stuff.
and maybe that's it, gladly. Bam.
The winner is in those pictures, but it's not, those were mine, because those were the ones I took a picture of.
Those were not the winners, those look pretty good.
Those were not the winner, I might have been in like fourth place. The guys who took time off did theirs like in the sous vide machine, or they roasted, or like put them on the smoker and the grill, like they used more than one technique.
And that's the only part of the process of sharing. Other than that, it's all. That concludes, my update. Any questions for me?
Yeah, I got a question, Richard. What's the anticipated kickoff for our curb appeal signage improvement?
That's on the August agenda, along with the land use risk assessment will be on August agenda. So again, a lot of items for the August agenda.
Anything else for Richard? Hearing none, great. Board of directors comments.
Yeah, I got a comment. Thanks, Blake, for correcting me on my
Terminology.
my analogy of our byproducts from the plant.
Biosolids.
No further comment.
Okay,
Was a good thing, I was between.
okay, yeah. Dave, anything,
The hammer.
Yeah, I just wanted to be away from that gavel because
any other comments from you? No? Scott?
I'm good.
Dan, no, all right, just good job, staff. I will say, TSD put the good word out for the wastewater industry. We won first prize in the, Truckee 4th of July parade.
That toilet,
Yeah, you guys saw it with our 9-foot high toilet float and, a bunch of gals marching with plungers, and it was great. Yeah, so the community apparently really liked it.
Was a salary challenge for TTS.
There you go. Next year. Yeah, that's it for me. Doesn't look like we have a closed session,
We do not.
so at this point,
Part of the obvious is even for the land use risk assessment.
okay. Fantastic, thank you, staff. Move to adjourn. So move. Okay. We will be adjourned.
11:15. Bye, Josh.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
I hope,